Hey everyone, and welcome to episode number 25 of the Nerd Federation podcast. I am your host, Will Hernandez. It's Tuesday, May 7th. I'm recording this podcast on a great Tuesday night, a nice 77 degree day, and man, what a weekend it's been for pro wrestling and video games, really, and really Xbox. And my God, I'm going to get into the Xbox stuff later on in the podcast, but things are not looking so well for Xbox right now after closing 4 studios today and doing a bunch of layoffs, and it's a tough road for them right now, even though we're about a month away from the June showcase, and apparently they have a lot of games to announce for that showcase. So video games are top of mind today a little bit, but I'm definitely going to go into the pro wrestling stuff first because, as I had mentioned last week, I attended TNA's Under Siege on Friday, and wow. So here's the thing. The way I'm going to start off this review and go ahead and get in before I get into Under Siege, I want to start with a plea to my fellow pro wrestling fans, particularly the males out there. Please wear fucking deodorant. It's not that hard. Y'all motherfuckers pay $35 without even thinking about it for a t-shirt, but you can't spend $8 to $10 on a stick of deodorant. Now, let me backtrack a little bit here, because pro wrestling fans and video game fans tend to have this stereotype about them. And I hate it. I hate that stereotype for them. And I hate it for us, to be quite honest. And I've even run into it online on a bunch of different social media outlets. For as much as we say that Threads is this nice, happy place with rainbows and fucking butterflies all over the place, there are also some assholes out there, like some real dickheads that make these assumptions about people who like these genres. But here's the thing. Some of y'all are not helping with this. And Friday night, some people in the Washington Avenue Armory in Albany, New York, were living up to the stereotype. And it was immediately evident when my girlfriend and I sat down in our section. We were sitting 2 rows deep, right there ringside. I had somebody sitting to the right of me that smelled like cat piss. No fucking lie. Like dead ass smell like cat piss. My girlfriend had somebody sitting behind her that smelled like wet socks. And I smelled it at times too, which is even worse because of what's behind me and what's to the right of me. And every time this guy got up from his seat, you smelled it. This guy that was sitting in front of us had this greasy flop of hair on his head. And I'm going to get to that dude a little bit later on. Guys, I cannot stress to you enough the importance of personal hygiene, the importance of showering, the importance of using deodorant, the importance of fucking moisturizing. If you're not going to moisturize, at least come to the table smelling clean and having deodorant on, because it was fucking hot as balls in that Armory, and that did not help. We immediately sat down and I was already sweating. And about 15 minutes in, we had to go get water because we were just it was very hot in there, which I was a little surprised about because I thought it would be cooler in that Armory. That was kind of the vibe that place gave off, but it was hot as hell. And you could see with the wrestlers too, because they were sweating their balls off in that arena, Armory, whatever you want to call it. But again, I cannot stress to you how important personal hygiene is, men. Really. Please fucking do better going forward, because that shit is fucking embarrassing. Please. Okay. Got that out of the way. So as far as, and I'm really jumping into it this week, guys, I'm not wasting any time. As far as the pay-per-view overall, I thought it was a really good show that was hurt in some sense by a lackluster crowd. And this is a pattern I'm noticing when I watch TNA. There might be some great action going on in the ring and the crowd is silent. And I'll give you a good example, because obviously I was there. I was sitting 2 rows in. Jonathan Gresham and Kushida were putting on a clinic in the ring during their match, and there was complete silence at times. I couldn't believe it. I'm sitting there like, wow, this crowd is fucking dead. And I kept on saying that over and over and over again as the night went on. And I don't know if some people were just thrown off by this gimmick that Gresham is doing right now, where he's coughing during his matches because of the octopus ink. And if you saw the ending to that match, it was interesting to say the least, with Gresham basically coughing up the black ink into Kushida's face and pinning him in that method with almost like a modified mandible claw in some ways. But it was deadly silent during the majority of that match. And people want to give AEW fans shit, and this is where I will defend AEW fans, and I will die on this hill. But people would have been loud for that match had it been on AEW television. And that's why I got miffed by this greasy haired jobber that was sitting in front of me when he made a comment that no one is watching AEW. Dude, that arena at that point might as well have been empty, because there was a deafening silence during this match. And it's something that's not the fault of the talent in the ring. And it was a theme all night, really. It really was. You had Mustafa Ali and Ace Austin had this great match for the X Division title, and it was mostly quiet throughout the match. During the women's knockouts tag team match, the championship match, I felt like there was complete silence. And even when Alicia Edwards and Masha Slamovich won the match and the titles, there was no reaction whatsoever. And it was just like, God damn. And again, not the fault of the talent. I don't think so. And I'm going to get into that in a bit. But the biggest reaction of the night happened during the main event between the System versus Matt Hardy, Speedball, Bailey, and Trent Seven. And I think that mostly had to do with the fact that the broken Matt Hardy character was back and people knew who he was. And I'm gonna get into that in just a minute. But I do think in some ways TNA has a bit of a problem going forward in some regards with the crowd situation. And here's my theory on that. How many people that are coming to these events, to these PLEs, as they're calling them, are watching the product week to week? Probably not many, right? So I think what's happening, this is my assumption, and I'm assuming that because based on my own experience and based on what I heard people were saying around me. I think what's happening is that people who live in the area or within a good driving distance from, in this case, Albany, they get wind of TNA coming to their town. And I think it's a situation that people want to go see pro wrestling in person and buy tickets to something like this, even if they don't necessarily watch the product consistently. And like I said, I heard a few conversations that were like that. There was this guy, when we first walked in to the arena, I went to the bathroom and then we're going to our seats, and there was a guy there with his two sons, and I heard him remark that he said to his sons, "You guys don't even know anyone wrestling tonight." That was what he said. And one of the kids said, "Well, we know Matt Hardy." Mr. Cat Piss guy that was sitting next to me asked me a couple of questions about current storylines that I could barely answer because shit, I'm not watching the week to week. I barely know what's going on. I know enough based off of the last pay-per-views that I have watched. But it just seems, based on what was around me, based on my own personal experience, that with these shows, with these TNA shows, that you have a lot of casual fans going to these shows, and that is really not a good thing because it does not present the best product on television. Now, I'm sure TNA is happy they got their money. Don't get me wrong. And that arena was not full. There was a whole section of seating that was facing the stage that was mostly empty. I would say, geez, I'd be surprised if there were 1,000 people in that Armory on Friday night. That's how paltry the attendance is. Don't forget, AEW's in trouble. I just thought I would throw that. I just thought I would throw that out there. Again, it is what it is. And I knew it was going to be a bit of a struggle with the crowd because when they were trying to hype that crowd up before they went on air at 8 p.m., there was a struggle. There was a struggle getting that crowd going. So, I don't know. I'll be curious to see. I would love to go to the show in Montreal. I forget exactly what the name of the pay-per-view is, because you figure maybe the Canadian crowd is going to be better based on my own past experiences and based on experiences we've seen as pro wrestling fans when promotions go to Canadian cities. But we'll see. TBD on that front. As far as the show is concerned, I enjoyed it. Like, I had a good time. And when you're sitting 2 rows from the ring, it can be incredibly eye-opening. And I've only ever sat that close once before, and it was during a WWF house show in Madison Square Garden a very, very long time ago, where my aunt and I got tickets via my mom, who always had this group at her job at the post office that got always put in for tickets for every show at Madison Square Garden for many, many years. And that was the last time I had sat that close, like second row. I've been to some indie shows where I've sat pretty close, but when you're on top of the ring like that, it brings a different kind of intimacy when you're watching these wrestlers in the ring. And it had my girlfriend's attention because when you're sitting that close, it's definitely a different perspective for what's going on in the ring. because the athleticism and the timing needed to make a match run smoothly is just something that the average person doesn't possess. And quite frankly, I don't even think the wrestling fans out there, a good portion of them, can even acknowledge that and realize that. You look at the men and women that were hitting that ring on Friday night, and they were working hard out there. Even if you want to say the match was a stinker, I mean, shit, man. They made everything look good in that ring, and there might have been maybe one or two times I thought to myself, that didn't look so great. But you know what? It's pro wrestling, and not everything is going to go smoothly. But I will say Friday night, sitting up that close, I saw a lot of things that went smoothly in the ring. As far as what I really liked from the show, I'd say if you can, go out of the way and watch Ali versus Ace Austin. I mean, those two fucking tore it up. And again, the crowd wasn't as into it as I thought they should be. So that's definitely a match to definitely check out from this past weekend. Gresham versus Kushida, I already mentioned that. Again, another really good match. I think people were just thrown off by Gresham's gimmick, which TBD on that one and whether that's going to go anywhere. But I saw somebody mention on Threads, because I posted about the Gresham's gimmick, and this guy was like, "Oh, this is probably the best character work he's ever done." Bro, it's been one time that we've seen it in action. You can't make that judgment call just yet. You have to let things play out, and I'm willing to let things play out as far as Gresham is concerned. Main event was chaotic and fun. I mean, I had a feeling it would be, and now those kind of matches are sometimes they're clusterfucks. So I kind of expected that and got that in some ways, but I thought it was a really strong way to end the show. I know a lot of people kind of view this as like a B show, which it was, and they only had 2 weeks of television to build it up. So the stories weren't necessarily deep, and there were injuries. Hammerstone wasn't there. Apparently he wasn't cleared to compete on Friday, so you had that happen, and I think there were some changes to the pre-show that went down because of injuries. So, you know, that kind of stuff is gonna happen. I would also say, if you can, go out of the way and watch the Jordan Grace and PCO versus Khan and Steph DeLander match, because that was fun from the perspective of what Grace can do in the ring. And I forget that TNA has men wrestle women. Like, that is a common thing. It's not mixed tag rules. So when the woman comes in, they can go after the men and vice versa. So when Grace gets into the ring with Khan, I think it was especially the second time, all hell breaks loose. And at one point, Grace lifts Khan off on her shoulders and then hits a Death Valley driver. Like, almost effortlessly. Like, it was pretty fucking amazing, despite, yeah, you know what? Grace is getting a little bit of help on the liftoff, but to be able to basically stand upright and then do that Death Valley driver like it was nothing, pretty fucking impressive from her. And man, I just continue to be impressed by what she does in the ring. So I'd say overall, the show was a solid 7 and maybe even a 7.5 in some spots. And that being said, I really, really need to do a better job of like watching the weekly show going forward, because I think it's a disservice to show up at this pay-per-view and not have as much context as possibly needed for the show. So anyway, you have TNA on one side of the spectrum, and then you have WWE on the other side. And let me take a sip of water here quickly. And I watched Backlash over a couple of days, and that crowd in France was really something else. And I've got a lot to say about that crowd because I've been seeing some takes online that I just don't necessarily agree with. And part of the reason why that crowd was as enthusiastic as it was is because they don't get to see those events in person as often as we do. And I saw some people online trying to downplay that. Like, oh, that's not an excuse. No, it is an excuse. Look at the TNA show that I was at on Friday, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was the second live show I've attended this year. When you add in when I went to Boston for the show where Mercedes arrived. I'm going to Forbidden Door in June. I'm sure I'll go to at least, I don't know, another 2 or 3 shows this year. I was going to go to the SmackDown that's happening the Friday before Forbidden Door, but it just didn't work out because I'm going to be going away that weekend. So let's see, 2 to 3, 5, 6 maybe I might be going to this year. How many events do you think those people went to in the past 5 years? That's the thing you have to ask yourself. I'm sure that there were some people in that crowd that went to London for All In. I'm 100% probably guaranteed that someone in that crowd went to All In. TNA doesn't run Europe like it used to. Don't forget, they would sometimes spend weeks over there at a time, especially in the UK, because they were getting good crowds for the tapings, Impact tapings, and it was coming across very well on television. I'm sure a lot of you remember kind of that period for TNA. So those people were fucking stoked to be in that atmosphere at a pay-per-view, at a show that counted. We're not talking about a live event. We're talking about an actual fucking pay-per-view. And those people were stoked to be in that atmosphere in the same way the Backlash crowd in Puerto Rico was last year when they got to witness a pay-per-view. And I think, I think it's pretty clear at this point that at least for Backlash, they're going to make this a yearly thing where they go outside of the U.S., even though Puerto Rico's a part of the U.S., but you know what I mean. They're going to go outside the mainland U.S. and have this Backlash show overseas now every year. Who knows? Maybe, if I were them, I'd go to fucking Japan next year for that, man. Why the hell not? Why the hell not? Stake your flag in the ground and go to Japan and do a fucking pay-per-view in Japan. I mean, don't forget, they did that for Beast of the East. It was that network special that they did. If you remember, Brock Lesnar against Kofi. And then you had, was it Kofi? I think it was Kofi. And then you had Kevin Owens against Finn Balor for the NXT Championship. And don't forget, Balor won the title over there, to the shock of many people that were watching that event. But going back to the crowd itself for Backlash, throughout the weekend, we were seeing these inevitable comparisons between the US and the France crowds. And I'm just like, just stop it. Why are we doing this? Like, why are we making this comparison? You're comparing two different cultures. You're comparing what's essentially a European soccer crowd to an American football crowd. It's not the same. It's not the same with all the little chants. And God, those fucking people were chanting like they were being paid to chant. It was fun. It was really fun. And I don't think I've ever in my life, and Randy Orton has had that theme for a long time. And I've been watching Randy Orton wrestle with that theme for a long time. There has not been a single crowd that's ever fucking sang the song like that. Never. I was just like, holy fuck. I'm sure he was surprised. I'm sure he was surprised by that. By the energy, too, of the Uso entrance and the lights and fuck, during the main event, how the camera was shaking when they were showing that shot of AJ Styles in the crowd. I mean, in the ring. The camera was shaking. Kind of like this desk is right now. But like, seriously, that crowd was just so into it. And then here we go. I start seeing people taking it a step further, talking about how AEW now needs to do more shows overseas. And yeah, I absolutely agree with that. But here's the problem. That shit is expensive. And for as much money as the cons have, now is not the time for AEW to do more shows overseas because they need to focus on the US. They need to focus on Canada, even though their Canadian crowds are usually pretty healthy. You're usually looking at, 3,000 to 5,000 for those shows. Now, do I think AEW could do well overseas? Yeah, I do. But the issue here is that WWE runs on a different model than AEW as far as live events are concerned. And I think we know because they stopped the shows. They stopped doing the house rules shows. Having Collision on Saturdays hamstrings AEW for live events. And I think at some point we're going to see more shows overseas for AEW, but it's not going to happen this year outside of All In. It will eventually happen. I do believe that. I know Ospreay was just quoted as saying that he wants AEW to do more shows overseas. Obviously for selfish reasons, because we think he's over here. Fuck, we know he's overseas. Didn't mean to put it that way. But anyway, as far as, believe it or not, that's as much as I'm going to say about AEW this week. I know, shocking. As far as Backlash itself, it was certainly, I thought, the show of the weekend. And I've only watched 2 matches from New Japan Wrestling Donataku. That was they have the 2-day, Friday and Saturday. Haven't watched everything there yet, but there is going to be a match I talk about later. But when you look at that main event with Cody Rhodes and AJ Styles, and I said this on Threads, but those two put on a fucking clinic. I know I use that a lot, but I don't know another way to say that. It was a masterpiece. Like, to me, that shit was a 5-star match. I don't give a fuck what anybody says. I don't give a fuck what Meltzer says. But that match was, no pun intended, phenomenal. It truly was. And I saw somebody say how they basically put on a New Japan style main event in that they built up the match to a crescendo and then they went all out at the end. And best of all, there was no outside interference at all. It was basically let the best man win, right? And guess what? We did this 5-6 match card in under 3 hours. I am curious about Cody's title reign going forward because it is clear that the bloodline is the A story in WWE. And that's without Roman Reigns in the building. Obviously, one of the big things on the pay-per-view on Saturday was Tonga Loa showing up as the Bloodline adds another member. And I love what they did. People who picked up on it, they probably didn't only, and you only probably know this if you watched New Japan, but they talked about Destiny and guerrilla warfare with Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa. Gorillas of Destiny. That was what those two were called in New Japan, as they were this subsection of Bullet Club. And don't forget, Tama Tonga is an original Bullet Club member. Don't forget about that. He was there with day one with Carl Anderson and Finn. Well, Prince Devitt, right? That's what they called him back then. So, but yeah, it's I'm curious because I'm curious what's going to happen when Roman comes back, right? And how that's going to play out. You know, at some point there's going to be a rematch, which I'm assuming Roman's going to win. I mean, Cody's going to win. And it'll probably be because of some civil war that's happening in the bloodline. But I really do hope that Cody has a significant run. And having Styles as your first opponent isn't bad, but I saw people saying that, oh, this is boring. Listen, Cody was involved in a 2-year storyline, essentially. So anything immediately following that is going to be seen as boring to some. And you have to say too, you know, there's always this, for as long as I've been watching WWE, there has always been this post-WrestleMania malaise because it's kind of a reset now. You kind of have to reset things going forward. But it is funny. It is funny to me how the Bloodline storyline continues unabated, minus Roman Reigns. So they haven't reset. Well, they kind of are resetting with like the cast of characters involved there. But it is interesting. You know, as for the rest of the show, I'm not going to get into like match by match here, but I love the pacing of it. Like, they did great with the pacing of the show. I wasn't being consistently advertised to. The matches flowed from one to the other, and there was no backstage bullshit. It kind of reminded me of an AEW pay-per-view in that sense, but it's also a callback to the way Triple H ran those NXT pay-per-views. The blue and gold, Jesus, the black and gold of NXT. It was old school, and I get that you have to have these corporate sponsors for Mania, and you have to get all that gaga out of the way. But my preference is that you focus on that action in the ring and the storyline surrounding the action. So, in that sense, even though Backlash is considered a B, quote unquote, B pay-per-view, it was an A show in my book because of my sensibilities and my likes and dislikes. So kudos to WWE for putting on that it was a really, really good show. Like I said, I want to say 8.5, 10 because of the crowd, right? And that match, the main event match, that was a 10 as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, I didn't watch Raw, and I know they're doing the tournaments for King and Queen of the Ring heading into the Saudi Arabia show, and let me tell you guys, I'm sorry, but there was just too much to watch, and I can't watch it all. I was watching the Knicks game of all things, so I was just kind of done when that Knicks game was over, and I kind of went about my merry way. But I will say, I haven't watched all of New Japan stuff from this past weekend, but the match between Zack Sabre Jr. and Jeff Cobb on Friday was phenomenal. And The great thing about these matches is that they tend to come down to the last 3 minutes. And this was essentially the same thing. The finish is really, goddamn, Jeff Cobb is a fucking beast. He escapes the usual Zack Sabre Jr. armbar, and he gets up, he escapes it, and he still has Jr. holding on to him. And somehow, some way, I can't remember exactly how he does this, but he transitions Sabre into doing the tour of the islands for the finisher. If you know, he does like this rocking circular power slam type of thing. So he gets his momentum going when he does that. So the whole idea is that this big fucking powerful man is getting all this momentum going, and he's just fucking slamming you to the ring for the 1, 2, 3. Now, how many times has this belt changed hands since Wrestle Kingdom? I mean, they crowned Zack Sabre Jr. as a champion at Wrestle Kingdom. But then he almost immediately loses it to Matt Riddle. I think it was what? Maybe weeks later? Or was it to Tanahashi? He lost it to Tanahashi. I'm sorry. He loses it to Tanahashi. Then Zack Sabre Jr. gets it back. And then loses it to no, I'm sorry. Matt Riddle beats Tanahashi. Then Zack Sabre Jr. beats Riddle for the title. And now Jeff Cobb beats Zack Sabre Jr. for the title. I'm going to be curious to see what they do with that title for Forbidden Door. Because if Jeff Cobb is still holding that title for Forbidden Door, I think they can do something fun for that title with somebody. It's too bad MJF is probably not cleared to wrestle, because don't forget, actually no, it's Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho was the one that had Jeff Cobb as the hired gun, if you remember that. Who was he going up against? I think it was Moxley. Heading into their title match at Revolution, Cobb was coming in for all these, they were going back. Was it MJ? I can't remember. Oh, God. I can't remember now off the top of my head which storyline that was involved in. You see, AEW does storylines. I'm telling you, I can't even remember what part of the storyline that was a part of. If I'm not mistaken, let's see. Jeff Cobb in AEW. Right. It was Cobb versus Moxley because Jericho brought him in as a hired gun. So that was heading into, February 13th. That was heading into Revolution. Okay, so I was right about that. You see, I know my shit, man. I definitely know my shit. I know my AEW stuff. So, but yeah. Again, that title has now changed hands so many times and often. And I don't necessarily know how I feel about that, but it certainly keeps these matches unpredictable at the end of the day. So, now, I don't really have a lot to say about AEW. I mean, I watched last week. They didn't have Collision this past Collision this past week because of the NBA playoffs. So I don't really have a lot to say. I think it's interesting that Kenny Omega is back in some way. From the time that you're hearing this, Omega is going to have some kind of announcement he's going to make on Dynamite, and they're pushing the angle forward. And man, it's just interesting seeing people's fucking reaction to this shit online. It's just, everybody's got something to complain about with AEW. It's unbelievable. Like, when did it become the popular thing to do to really shit on AEW? And I think I might be answering my own question. I think a lot of it might have to do with Tony Khan, if I'm being completely fucking honest, because he keeps running his fucking mouth. And I went to this whole diatribe last week about that. I just wish he would just shut up, right? Let the product do the talking on the screen. Just shut the fuck up. But I'll be curious to see what happens on Wednesday. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that New Japan has their Resurgence pay-per-view on Saturday in California. And I should be watching that. It costs an extra $20 to pay for. If you don't know that, if you have New Japan World, you have to pay $20, an extra $20 to watch any pay-per-view that's in the US. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to watch that because the last show that they did, Windy City Riot, was pretty good. And obviously Moxley is going to be in the main event there, and that card is fucking stacked. Let me just see quick. New Japan 1972. That's the English site for all those wondering. Schedule. Oh. Not found. Looks like they're having. Website is currently undergoing maintenance. Okay. There you go. Oh, and they had a notice of website maintenance. Anyway. It's May 5th and it's already the 7th. Oh, boy, they're having a interesting dilemma here with their website. Anyway, should be a good show. If you can watch it. I think you can get it on Thriller, if I'm not mistaken. So, anyway, that's going to do it for the pro wrestling portion of the show. I'm going to take a quick break and then come back and just talk about everything that's going on with Xbox at the moment. My goodness, what a fucking shit show. And I usually try to stay away from the negative stuff, but I like to nerd out about Xbox because it's my platform of choice. But man, the shit that's been going on, especially today, is just, I think it's worth talking about. So I'll be back right after this. And welcome back to the Nerd Federation podcast. I am your host, Will Hernandez. I'm pausing a lot here. I'm looking at GarageBand and making sure everything is recording okay. Jesus Christ. I just took my break. It's hot as fuck in this room right now. I'm getting a little bit worried about how this room is going to play out in the summertime when I start recording, because the door is closed, the window is closed. I don't think I can get a fan in here because there'll be too much feedback in the background. There's no AC in this room during the summertime. The ACs go in the living room and in the main bedroom. So TBD how that is going to hold up in the summertime. By the way, because I really didn't get into much of a preamble in the beginning of the show, I'm toying with changing the name of the podcast. It's going to be very slight. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start calling it the Nerd Federation, and just basically the addendum to that be a podcast about pro wrestling and video games. There are a lot of mistakes that I made when I created this show, and I think I'm rethinking that, the name and stuff like that, and the artwork and all that, because I don't know, man. I'm seeing podcasts out there that have been out for less time than mine, already finding success, and I'm 25 episodes in, and my listenership is, it's minuscule. So I don't know. Hopefully a little bit of a rebranding helps. Hopefully that happens very soon. I can't believe next week is already episode number 26. And that puts me halfway through the year. Halfway through a year's worth of podcasts is pretty fucking crazy. So still going forward with the other podcast idea. That hopefully is going to start taking more shape in the next few weeks. So more information on that when the time comes. So, man, Xbox, holy mother of God. I'm not even sure where to begin with this. And I guess maybe I'll start with what was happening because, and guys, I'm shooting from the hip here. I didn't do a lot of preparation for this particular segment, so I'm basically speaking from the heart and speaking from the stuff that I read and speaking from my read of the whole situation. And the reason why it's important, the reason why I'm bringing it up is because I've been with Xbox since the very beginning. And based off of the moves that were made today, based off of the broken promises that this company continues to break, to do, there is a lot of questions about right now the long-term health of Xbox. And here's the other thing too about this whole thing. My gut tells me that this is really more Microsoft than anything else. Don't forget, Xbox is a division in Microsoft, and it's a very small part of the overall Microsoft business. But the issue here is when Microsoft spent $70 billion, would it be $70 billion to purchase Activision Blizzard, I think Microsoft woke up and said, oh shit, we needed to pay attention now to Xbox. And I think that's what's happening. And I think you're seeing that right now. You saw there were layoffs earlier in the year, fresh off of the Activision Blizzard acquisition. And you had people like Elizabeth Warren bitching and complaining, saying, oh, that was, look, this is why these mergers are bad, blah, blah, blah. Listen, that was going to happen because of the way the video game industry was going at the moment. But this, what happened today? Damn, if you have a chance, go to Mr. Matty Plays, go to his YouTube channel, and watch the video that he did about the news today. That dude was spitting fucking bars the whole 17 to 19 minutes of that video. I was eating eating some lunch, and I was standing in the kitchen over the sink eating, basically, because I do this sometimes because I'm a psychopath. And I'm just like, wow, Matty is just eviscerating Microsoft and Xbox right now. So here's the thing. The high level story is that today, May 7th, this morning, Microsoft/Xbox had closed a number of Bethesda studios. And I'm going to read this from the IGN article that was written by Wesley Yin. I'm going to make sure I get that right. Wesley Yin Poole. And I'm just going to read some of this right now. Microsoft has closed a number of Bethesda studios, including Redfall maker Arcane Austin, Hi-Fi Rush, and the Evil Within developer Tango Gameworks, and more in devastating cuts at Bethesda, IGN can confirm. Alpha Dog Games, a maker of the mobile game Mighty Doom, will also close. Roundhouse Studios will be absorbed by the Elder Scrolls Online developer ZeniMax Online Studios. Microsoft, currently valued at $3 trillion, they had to get that in there, which is fine. It's a little bit of a shot at Microsoft. Did not say how many staff will lose their jobs, but significant layoffs are inevitable. IGN has asked Bethesda for comment. Microsoft declined to expand further when contacted by IGN. On Redfall, the disastrous vampire co-op game will now not receive promised updates, including an offline mode and new character DLC, as Microsoft has ended all development on the game. Microsoft said Redfall will remain online to play and provide a make-good offer to those who bought the Hero DLC. By the way, Redfall is fucking awful. At least the version that I played of it. Maybe put like an hour or two into that game. Awful, awful, awful. Arcane Lyon which is working on Marvel's Blade, survives the call, as does Bethesda Game Studios, which makes Fallout, The Elder Scrolls, Starfield, and Machine Games, which is doing Indiana Jones and The Great Circle. Doom developer id Software is also unaffected. They go here and they talk about like Matt Booty. I know it's funny last name. It makes me laugh. Matt Booty, he's the head of Xbox Game Studios, and basically they blame the cuts on a reprioritization of titles and resources. Basically, what's going to happen now going forward is that Microsoft is really going to hone in on the heavy hitters, the Fallouts, the Oblivions, the Starfields, the Forzas. They got Indiana Jones coming out. They got this Blade game that Arcane Lyon is developing. Hopefully Halo, Gears of War. So it's not going to leave much room for these smaller titles that some of these studios like Tango Gameworks was making. And that was, I think, the beauty of Microsoft, I should say Xbox compared with Sony PlayStation, is that you have a lot of variety in the games that are produced by the Xbox studios. Now, I think that that's going to continue to go forward. I think you are going to get a variety of different game types from Xbox. But the great thing that the reason why people love the Hi-Fi Rush is because it was different. It was something out of left field. It was shadow dropped, if you remember, in January of 2023 during that developer direct. It was the first one that Microsoft had, that Xbox had, and they dropped Hi-Fi Rush in the Game Pass that day. We were playing Hi-Fi Rush that day, and people were fucking ranting and raving about how great it was. Apparently, though, it wasn't that great because now Tango Gameworks, which is Xbox's only Japanese studio, an area of the world they've always struggled in, their only Japanese studio is no more. So you could essentially forget about Japan for Xbox going forward. Now, the response to this has been interesting online because a lot of people are furious. And I get it. It's been a tough year and almost 6 months for the gaming industry with the massive amount of layoffs that are happening in the industry. And they're coming from an industry that continues to make money hand over fist. So for a lot of people, things are not adding up. So you've got that part of the situation here. The other part of the situation, which I am seeing from people like Maddie, people like Jez Corden, and others who are in tune with the Xbox ecosystem. Jez is a journalist, right? Even though he says he's not. Mr. Maddie plays as a content creator who has a heavy, he loves the Fallout series. He loves the Bethesda games. So he's got some good insight into all of this. But it seems like from everybody, from content creators to fans to journalists, et cetera, it seems as though the biggest thing to come out of this is that now you cannot trust anything that Xbox says at all. And that's a fucking problem. It's a fucking problem when you are trying to sell systems, when you are trying to sell games, and when you are trying to sell fans on the future of the platform, which was already kind of iffy. And I'm somebody, I have to be honest, because when a lot of this stuff was going down in the last 6 months, about 6 to 9 months, I should say, about Xbox going more third party, being a multi-platform publisher. They putting games on PS5. They're putting games on Switch now. We saw the success of Sea of Thieves on PlayStation. We've seen now, because Microsoft owns it, Xbox owns it, we see Fallout all over the place on the charts for PlayStation. Even Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, made mention during the earnings call. Think about this. And the reason why this is important is because Xbox was seen as an afterthought for many, many years for Microsoft. But you've got Satya Nadella getting on the earnings call and saying, hey, guys, did you see the PlayStation charts last month? We had almost half the games on those charts between Fallout, between Sea of Thieves, between Minecraft, between Call of Duty, Pentiment. I don't know if Pentiment's up there. Hi-Fi Rush. Their shit was plastered all over the place. It's crazy. But now you're in this situation and you're coming off all this hoopla, people paying attention to Fallout and all the positive press that was generating. Now, just like a week later, it is fucking doom and gloom for the platform. And again, getting back to my feeling, I have to admit, I kind of ignored all this for a while because I didn't think it was that big of a deal, right? I didn't think it was that big of a deal that Xbox was going to be putting more of their stuff all over the place. But here's the thing. When you're doing that, it now makes me question whether I should be having all these systems now going forward. Now I'm sitting there and saying to myself, and this was the joke, oh, all that stuff was coming to PlayStation. Why should I own an Xbox? And I think that is the question people are asking themselves, especially if you're a 2 to 3 console household like I am. I've got a Series X. I've got a Series S in the office that I'm recording this in right now. I've got my Switch in here. I've got a PS5 in the living room. The PS5 and the Series X are in the living room. Why do I need to buy an Xbox now going forward if all of these games are going to be on the other platforms? If they're going to be on Sony PlayStation, if they're going to be on the next Switch, which I'll get into in a minute, a little bit later on. I mean, if I can play Halo on my PS5 and PS6 going forward, what's the point of having an Xbox? I think that is the issue right now. And honestly, today, it's so funny. Yesterday and today, I think it was more yesterday because there was some other shit that was going on with Jess Corden, which I'll get into. Hopefully I don't forget. I was thinking, man, maybe I should invest in a great PC. I've always thought about it, dabbled my thoughts in it. But I thought to myself, man, PlayStation is bringing more games to PC day and date. Helldivers 2 being a perfect example. Microsoft is already putting their games on Steam. Why don't I invest in a PC that's going to last me a few years? And maybe I'm not necessarily upgrading every year, maybe on a graphics card, but why not just do it that way? Part of the thing that's stopping me from doing that is that I don't want to sit at a desk and game. I work at a desk. I don't want to also sit at a desk and game. I want to do that on my couch, especially since I work from home. So maybe that is out of the question, but it does make me wonder. It does make me wonder to go full PC going forward. I don't know. It's interesting. And then the reason why I was thinking about that was because over the last week, Jess Corden at Window Central caught a lot of shit because somebody misinterpreted what he was saying during a private Discord channel, a discussion there, and saying that, oh, I think Xbox is going to just bring everything over, Gears of War and Halo included. And that set off a fucking shitstorm, and people just being completely angry at Jez, and people really just being completely angry at Xbox and their future plans. So there is a great amount of angst and animosity towards Microsoft, towards Xbox, towards Phil Spencer, towards Sarah Bond, towards Matt Booty. It's insane. The shit that I've been seeing on the internet today. Fire these people. These people don't deserve jobs. Microsoft should just shut down Xbox and just go about their merry way. Bro, that's not happening. Like, they just spent $70 billion on Activision Blizzard. Now, what might happen going forward is maybe the Xbox brand goes away and somebody, I forget who said this. I think it was actually, it was Jez who said this on the Xbox 2 podcast. Maybe the Xbox brand goes away and you're left with just a general Microsoft gaming, and they become this heavy hitter third party, and perhaps they cease to make consoles. I don't know. Everybody seems to think that they're going to keep on making consoles, but I mean, right now, man, it is just not looking good. And before I got on here, I was just like looking at some stuff that people were tweeting about this whole thing. And I want to read some of this stuff. This is what Ryan McCaffrey, who's Mr. Xbox, has been for a very long time. I've been following him he's almost as old as I am. So I've been following him for a very long time. And he quoted out this Phil Spencer quote that was from May 2023. And Ryan's like, this quote is from May 4th, 2023. Almost exactly, in italics, 1 year ago today. This is what Phil Spencer says. Quote, "One thing I won't do is push against creative aspirations of our teams. When a team like Rare wants to do Sea of Thieves, when a team like Obsidian wants to do Grounded, when Tango wants to do Hi-Fi, when everyone thought that they were probably doing The Evil Within 3, ellipsis, I want to give the teams a creative platform to go and push their ability to push their aspirations." Guess what? Tango Gameworks did that, and they now no longer exist. Another one. This is Gene Park, who's with the boys over at us, Last Day of Media, and is the video game guy at the Washington Post. He retweeted something that Daniel Ahmad said. I have followed Daniel, I think. He's a director of research at Nico Partners. He analyzes, the industry, video games market in Asia and the Middle East. It's becoming clear to me that as Game Pass growth has slowed, Xbox is increasingly looking to take an IP-first approach to its consumer-facing business. That's not to say service and platform aren't still important, but that it seems like Xbox wants its games to be profitable as standalone titles. Interesting. Previously, Xbox was looking at Game Pass as a way to offset developments for its own first-party titles. It doesn't look like that's the case anymore, and also helps explain their recent exploration of releases on competing platforms. That's kind of been another thing that's come up. It's just like Game Pass. I mean, I don't know, man. Like somebody responded like, Game Pass is not provided nothing of value to their customers. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily the right call there, and he also mentions PlayStation Plus. I don't know if that's the case there, but man, there's something going on here Like with the video game industry has completely changed, and we are seeing the effects of that. And I have mentioned this at times in the past. I mentioned this in January when all these other layoffs were happening at Activision Blizzard. This has been an issue for a while, and I am going to be very interested to see what happens to Xbox going forward. I am so curious about what Phil Spencer is going to say. Like, what can this man say at this point? Because people are going to treat it like garbage right now. Nobody's going to take his word for anything he's saying. And they were supposed to have all this momentum, man. The showcase is a month away. June 9th, Sunday, June 9th. Xbox should be coming to that table with a massive fucking amount of games. Call of Duty, the next Call of Duty, Indiana Jones, the expansion for Starfield. There's people talking about Gears of War 6. Maybe Forza. Maybe Perfect Dark. There's a lot of shit out there. And now you have this news today and everybody's like, man, like what is happening? So I don't know. It's interesting because on the day that Nintendo says that the Switch's successor is coming out before March of 2025, you have Xbox essentially shooting themselves in the foot and being like, hold my beer as I fuck up the industry even more. Damn, man. Going back to the Switch, very excited about that. I'll be curious to see again how that plays out because they're positioning it as not a new platform, but a iteration of the Switch, which makes sense, right? You've got that handheld, for lack of a better term, desktop console for the mass market that basically kill two birds with one stone. Because you have those people that like to play their games on the go, and then you have the people who like to dock it and then play their games on a TV. And the Switch hit that itch, scratch that itch, and now they're gonna do the same thing for the Switch's successor. So it's man, what an interesting day. It's been a really interesting day for video games, and I'm gonna stop it there because I have been playing Stellar Blade, but I don't really wanna get into it. Oh, one thing I do want to talk about quickly before we I say adieu, goodbye, good night, whatever the fuck Kenny Omega says. Talk about Starfield quickly. Speaking of Bethesda, and man, they put out this thing last week that they were going to be updating the game May 15th with a whole bunch of like quality of life things. And I'm like, God damn it, guys. Why couldn't you people do this fucking thing in the beginning when this game was launched? Why do we have to wait so long to get 60 frames? When they were basically acting as though 60 frames wasn't a priority when the game was being developed. That was like their vision. Oh, 30 frames, a stable 30 frames. Because you're going around the world and picking everything up, so that's not going to work for 60 frames. Had to keep it at 30 frames. So now it's like, I'm putting in this time to a second playthrough of Starfield, and it's just like, God damn it, man. Why'd you guys have to do this? It's so fucking annoying that I've got to deal with this. Like, do I wait the next 8 days to start playing Starfield again? I'm not going to, because I want to get the story done already. Like, I want to put this to bed and finally say that, yeah, I beat the main story of Starfield. So that was it. That was the only other thing I wanted to say, because that really, as much as I nerd out about Starfield, that whole situation was very, it was disappointing. I mean, listen, I'm glad that they're making these quality of life things. They're going to be fucking vehicles now in the game, which is like, come on, man, really? This is what we're doing now? We're putting vehicles in the game? But it is what it is. And When the update comes out, I'm sure it'll be great, but maybe I might be done with the game by then. We shall see. So that's going to do it for episode number 25. It's a little bit of a shorter episode, mostly because I did not have time to really play stuff in depth this week. But next week should be action-packed show for my half-year anniversary, which is fucking crazy to say that I've gone through 26 episodes of the show. And yeah, I mean, a lot of people have said that you really have to, you're basically talking to yourself in the first year. And I definitely feel that way right now. So, but yeah, a little bit of a rebrand is coming for sure. I think going forward, this will be called the Nerd Federation, and then the addendum of a podcast about pro wrestling and video games. I'm going to start dabbling with a new logo, and hopefully you'll see that cover art. I don't know. Probably not going to happen until after I come back from San Francisco in a few weeks, but going to start making some little changes, and we'll go from there. But thanks a lot. Thanks for joining me this week. And again, if this is something you enjoy, this podcast is something you enjoy, please share it. Please leave a star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And yeah, because that stuff does help with, what do they say? Visibility with these podcasts. So thanks a lot, everyone. And I will see y'all next week. Take care.